we're going to be hearing about a national treasure. It's called the Appalachian Trail, and it is the longest pedestrian path and the narrowest national park in the entire world. It passes through 14 different states, from Georgia to Maine. And we're going to find out a lot of wonderful things about it. Like, why does it even exist? And are there any dangers on the trail that you might want to know about? Let me just introduce the speaker today, who is here. Tom Curtis is a retired government affairs professional, many, many years in environmental policy in nonprofits in Washington, D.C., and that's been for 35 years. He graduated from West Virginia University and is a member of Kappa Beta Phi. After military service in Vietnam, including a tour as an Army platoon leader, he earned his master's degree in public administration from West Virginia University. And now I would like to have you please welcome our presenter today, Mr. Tom Curtis.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Curtis. Been walking since shortly after sunrise. I'm delighted to take a break and meet with y'all. Give me 1 second, please, to shed my backpack and get ready to talk. Hopefully without taking my microphone off. Okay, good morning again. I'm Tom Curtis, and I'm delighted to be here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects. Before we begin, a couple of words about the word. I call it either Appalachian or sometimes Appalachian, if I'm not paying attention. Linguists say that how you pronounce it depends on where you grew up. In the region, it tends to be pronounced Appalachian. Outside the region, it tends to be pronounced Appalachian. But if you say Appalachian in the region, somebody might throw an Appalachia. So it won't matter to me how you say it. What does the word mean? What does the word Appalachian mean? Again, linguists say that the Spanish in 1530 encountered some Native Americans in the very northern part of Florida, very southern part of Georgia, which geologically speaking is the southern end of the Appalachian mountain chain. And I don't know, I'd love to know how the Spanish communicated with people who were fundamentally of a different culture, different language, but they communicated somehow. And the Spanish said, "Who are you?" And the people said, "We're Appalachi," which was taken to mean we're the people from the other side of the river. Now, what river, what other side, I don't know, but that's as much as I know about the word Appalachian. And I'm here to talk about the trail. Let me see if I can advance the slide. No, that didn't work. Here we go. As Kit said, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Kit, the Appalachian Trail is the longest human feet only path in the world. There are longer trails in the world. There are two longer ones in the United States. The Pacific Coast Trail that runs up through California, Washington, Oregon, or Oregon, Washington to Canada, and the Continental Divide Trail, which runs up the spine of the Rocky Mountains from Texas to Montana. Those are longer, but they allow wheeled vehicles or pack animals. You can ride your horse along the Pacific Crest Trail. You can lead a mule or a donkey along the Continental Divide Trail. The Appalachian Trail is for feet only, and it's the longest path in the world that's for human feet only. I seem to be doing something wrong here. Let's try it this way. Okay, so who proposed the Appalachian Trail and why? Who built it? How is it maintained and managed? What's it like to hike it? And most interesting to me, what are a few of its many, many interesting stories? So a little background. In the 1920s, coal was in very widespread use in America. America was electrifying. Street lamps were going from oil to electricity. The power plants were built right downtown because there's so much transmission loss with distance from the power plant. They didn't understand how to handle that. So they built power plants right downtown. Apartment buildings and schools and homes and factories were heated in the winter by coal. So coal was in a very widespread use. Air pollution control was not. In fact, it was unknown. As a result, the nation's cities were highly polluted, and air in cities along the eastern seaboard was really bad. As a result of all of that, there was something doctors and demographers called the urban mortality penalty. In 1920, city dwellers were 40% more likely to die in any given year than rural residents of the same age. And most of that was believed due to city air pollution. But, of course, just west of the eastern seaboard rise the Appalachian Mountains with clean air and abundant fresh water. So, in 1921, in October of 1921, in the Journal of the American Institute of Architects, an article appeared called An Appalachian Trail, a Project in Regional Planning, written by a forester and philosopher named Benton McKay. This is a really interesting article. I wish I could have provided copies for you, but I commend it to your reading if you're interested. He proposed the Appalachian Trail, and I'm going to talk about his proposal for the trail in a moment. But this article reads like a socialist manifesto. He talks about the problem of workers and how they're required to live in crowded slums and smoggy, rat-infested cities. They're required by their jobs and their employers. And just west of the seaboard rise the Appalachian Mountains, as I said earlier. So his proposal was a footpath from the highest point in the southern Appalachians to the highest point in their north. It was still the highest is Mount Oglethorpe, Georgia, to Mount Katahdin, Maine. But it proved impossible to get access to the land around Mount Oglethorpe. It was all owned by big timber companies, and they would have none of people accessing it for a trail. So the southern terminus of the trail was moved from Mount Oglethorpe to Mount Springer Mountain, Georgia. And that's where it runs now, from Springer Mountain, Georgia to Mount Katahdin, Maine. And his proposal, Benton McKay's proposal, was for a system of hiking trails, access from many places to mountain camps, all with fresh air and clean water, cabins, campsites, gardens, and Chautauqua-like, or shall I say HASP-like, lectures and learning, free or communally owned and open to everyone. Hiking clubs and many others loved his proposal. And so a man named Myron Avery organized a meeting of hiking clubs from the 14 states between Mount Oglethorpe, Georgia, and Mount Katahdin, Maine, to meet in New York City in 1925. They met and they planned the route and established what they called the Appalachian Trail Conference. It's an asterisk because it's now called the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. But they established it in 1925. And in 1930s, and the trail clubs, the Georgia Mountain Club, the Maine Mountain Club, the New York Mountaineers, or whatever they called themselves, 31 walking, hiking clubs from Georgia to Maine organized, planned the route, and started the construction. It was 2,190 miles as proposed. Actually, that's today's mileage, 2,190 miles long, Why do I say today? Because if you think about it, the length changes constantly. A section is washed out in a flood or burned in a forest fire, and they reroute the trail a little bit so that the mileage actually changes, constantly. But as of today, it's 2,190 miles long. Here's a map. You can see, I don't know if I can, this is where it begins, Georgia. This is the end in Maine. Which state, from looking at this map, has the most miles of Appalachian Trail? Virginia. You're right. Virginia has about 1/4 of the entire mileage of the Appalachian Trail, where I live, state of Virginia. Which state has the fewest miles of Appalachian Trail? Actually, it's West Virginia, with 3.5 miles across the panhandle of West Virginia. Anyway, that's the layout of the trail. And a little historical perspective. Remember, this was proposed in 1921. There was one national park east of the Mississippi River in 1921, Acadia National Park in Maine. Wild spaces, national parks, wilderness, those ideas in the minds of most Americans were out west. They were the Great Plains and the Great Frontier and the Rocky Mountains. They weren't in the east. So this was radical in that sense. There were few other long trails in the world. The Inca Trail in Peru is older, and El Camino de Santiago in France and Spain is certainly older. Two other U.S. continental trails that the Pacific Crest Trail and the Continental Divide Trail were not yet even conceived. And as I said earlier, all those trails I've just named, exist today, but they allow bicycles or pack animals. The only human foot only trail, the longest, is the Appalachian Trail. So another thing about 1921, the perspective is Appalachia was remote. It was hard to access. The roads were poor, not paved, most of them, and small towns and scattered, isolated farms. Appalachia was considered unfriendly or downright hostile to outsiders. Nonetheless, the AT was built and maintained by 31 trail clubs between Georgia and Maine. This is a picture. By the way, all the photos here are ones I took, with the exception of a few historical people from back before my day that I got up from the Appalachian Trail Conservancy website, and one or two that were taken by friends I hiked with, where we shared photos. I am a life member of the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club that serves Northern Virginia, the Potomac River region. Anyway, it's Potomac Appalachian Trail Club and 30 other trail clubs like it built and maintained the built and still maintain the Appalachian Trail with thousands of volunteers. In fact, the Appalachian Trail Conference claims that with the data it has to report to the Internal Revenue Service to maintain its tax exemption and its status as a volunteer organization, that is one of the 3 largest volunteer organizations in the United States. That is largest in terms of the number of thousands and thousands of hours that are given by volunteers to the trail. Because it wasn't just building it, it's maintaining it. If you have any property with plants and trees and shrubs, you know that they grow. The Appalachian Trail grows over constantly. Brambles, branches fall, limbs fall, trees go down over the trail. Floods, heavy rains come, wash out parts of the trail. It's got to be maintained constantly. So there are hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours every year that go into that. The AT was complete in 1937. But 1 year later, hundreds of miles of it in the Northeast United States were obliterated or severely damaged by what's called the Great New England Hurricane of 1938. In 1938, hurricanes were not named alphabetically the way they are today. So this is simply called the Great New England Hurricane of 1938. It is to this day the most severe hurricane ever recorded in the Northeast United States. Winds were recorded in Mount Washington, Maine, at 186 miles an hour. Sustained winds of 122 miles an hour blew for hours and hours across the region. More than 20 inches of rain fell in 24 hours. So much that the water level in New York Harbor, you know how big New York Harbor is, the water level there rose 7 feet in 30 minutes from rain coming in down the Hudson and down from the Adirondacks, etc. That's a lot of water. So depression and war, the trail was essentially wiped out, at least in the Northeast US. Depression and war soon made trail repair and maintenance impossible. After all, this was late 1938. We resumed the draft in 1940. We were rationing gas in 1940, getting ready for what became our entry in World War II a little later. So large portions of the trail were called lost and forgotten. That's the nomenclature that the Appalachian Trail Conservancy itself used. It's lost and forgotten, they said. So much so that the Appalachian Trailway News summer edition of 1948 on the cover, 10 reasons it's impossible to hike the entire Appalachian Trail in 1 year. And inside the issue were 10 articles on each one with a different reason why it was not humanly possible to walk the trail in 1 year. And then in 1948, a 29-year-old named Earl Schaefer called the Appalachian Trail Conference in New York City and said he'd hiked it. What part of it, they said. All of it, he replied. No, you couldn't have, they said. He said, oh, I did. Come to New York City. We want to talk to you. And in the words of the director of the Appalachian Trail Conference, now Conservancy, they interrogated him for more than 4 hours, and not politely. They were disbelieving and wanting to prove him a liar. He kept a trail journal and taken photos. You saw the camera around his neck in that picture of him I showed you. They took his trail journal and assigned staff from the trail conference to make phone, look at his, you read this section and verify. So somebody would read a piece and they'd, operator, give me the Jones Farm in Irwin, Tennessee. Hello, yes, this is a Jones Farm. Oh, yes, Earl, Mr. Schaefer, I remember him, nice young man. He stayed in our barn for a couple of nights and helped Pa fix that fence on the North 40. They called and verified his story. And finally, and not in a very nice way, I have to say, they credited him with being the first person ever to hike the entire Appalachian Trail in one continuous hike, what today is called a through hike. When asked what motivated him to do it, he told the director of the trail conference, he practically burst into tears. I wanted to walk the war out of my system. He and his best boyhood friend had enlisted together after Pearl Harbor. They both served in the South Pacific. His friend died on Iwo Jima. And Earl Schaefer was never the same. And he was a recluse, a hermit. Probably today we'd call it PTSD. He was a lonely man ever after. That was 1948. Then in 1955, take a look at this woman and try to remember that picture, because I mention it again in a minute. A woman named Emma Gatewood, also known as Grandma Gatewood. She grew up dirt poor in the Appalachian region of Ohio. And by dirt poor, I mean she was the youngest of 15 children growing up in a dirt floor cabin. 4 to a bed, she and her siblings. She had 8 years of schooling at a time when the school year was 4 months long because the children were needed on the farm the other 8 months. School year started in January and ended in April. She went for 8 years. She herself, she was one of 15 children. She herself had 14 children, 22 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. She married at 19 and was abused and used hard for almost 40 years. beaten almost daily, until once she fought back. And she had the temerity to fight back, and she actually scratched her husband's face, and it put scratch marks on his face. So what did he do? He called the police. Who did they arrest? Her. She was arrested and taken to jail in a little town in West Virginia, where they had gone across from Ohio to visit some of his kinfolk in West Virginia. Called the police. She was arrested and taken to jail. It happened that the mayor of this little town in West Virginia went into the police station that afternoon on some business. He took one look at her and said, "This woman doesn't belong in jail. Take her to the hospital immediately." So they did. They took her to the hospital. He went to the hospital and spoke to the hospital manager and said, "She is to be released to no one but me. No, under no circumstances can she be released to her husband, only to me." He went to her room and visited her. By the way, she needed 14 stitches. She had a broken tooth, numerous bruises, 14 stitches on her face. And she was kept in the hospital for a night. He visited her and said, "Mrs. Gatewood, if you wish, you're welcome to come and stay with my wife and me when you're out of the hospital for as long as you want. And I promise you, no one will bother you in my house." So she did. And the mayor introduced her to the town, a lawyer, a prominent lawyer in town. He said, "Mrs. Gatewood, you know, there's something called divorce. And if you want, I'm pretty sure you'd qualify. You'd be able to get one." And she is one of the first women to get a divorce because she wanted it, not because her husband wanted a divorce. So she was divorced, and getting ahead of my slides, I guess. But she remember the picture I showed you some slides back? She was, remember, dirt poor, eight years times 4 months of schooling. She took a feed sack from the barn, sewed a drawstring across it, filled it with some things I'll show you in a minute, and she called her oldest child. This is after her youngest child had left home. She called her oldest child and said, "I'm going for a walk." Yeah, she actually went north by bus to Mount Katahdin in Maine and started hiking south. She fell and her glasses fell off and she stepped on them, broke her glasses. Then she was lost. And the rangers searched for her. They found her. They said, "Ma'am, you don't belong out here. You should go home." She did. She went home. But a year later, she called that child again and said, "I'm going on another walk." And she caught the bus, this time down to Georgia. She had a homemade sack, some canned food, a blanket, a light jacket, a plastic shower curtain, some matches, of course, a Swiss Army knife, and she used wild herbs to cure herself from rattlesnake bite. This was one tough lady, let me tell you. Anyway, she kept a trail journal in which she wrote, "The Appalachian Trail runs not just north and south, but into the soul. And on the trail, the petty entanglements of life are brushed aside like cobwebs." To me, this is poetry. This is beautiful writing. Anyway, she was the focus of huge national attention. Earl Schaefer had been in some outdoor magazines, Outdoor Life and Fishing World and so forth, but Grandma Gatewood made it big time. She was featured in leading newspapers and magazines around the country, around the world, actually. She was on ABC News, Good Morning America. And do you remember a program called What's My Line? She was on What's My Line, too. So her story led, among other things, President Kennedy to challenge the nation on physical fitness in 1961. Do any of you remember when he did that? Challenge the nation on physical fitness? The backstory is that the commander of the Old Guard, which is the elite military unit that guards the White House, guards the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and some other important installations. The commander of the Old Guard took his troops out he wanted to do a 25-mile forced march. And a lot of them couldn't do it. "Oh, my feet hurt. Oh, blisters." And President Kennedy said, I'm going to say, he said, "Are you kidding me?" I think he actually used a different word than kidding. He said, "My elite old guard can't walk 25 miles, and this 69-year-old great grandmother can walk 2,200 miles with a homemade sack and a bunch of canned food. What's wrong with this country?" So he challenged the nation on physical fitness. Then in 1968, President Johnson signed a law called the National Trail Systems Act. It made the AT a federally protected part of the National Park Service. It's the longest, narrowest national park in the world, as Kit Leggett said earlier. The law created a unique partnership. The National Park Service, a number of other federal agencies like the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they're part of it. Land management agencies in the 14 states through which the trail passes, and numerous other state, regional, county, local, and private organizations. When you walk into Pennsylvania, you cross on the AT into Pennsylvania, one of the first places you come to is what's the men's organization? Kiwanis Appalachian Trail Park. It's organized and maintained by the local Kiwanis group. And it's just a little regional park with a gazebo and some picnic tables and chairs and a fireplace or two. But that's an example of the use of involvement of private organizations in the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. It's all these organizations are managed by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, which I believe I said is now in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. It's not in New York City any longer. Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Okay, that's kind of some of the history. What's it like? This is not mile zero on the Appalachian Trail. This is how you get to mile zero on the Appalachian Trail. This is at Amicalola Falls State Park in Georgia. And you see this sign there, I hope you can read it, 8.5 miles up the side of Springer Mountain, you get to mile zero on the Appalachian Trail. This is mile zero. I'm standing at mile zero with my back facing, the end of the Appalachian Trail and looking straight ahead, 2,190 miles that way lies Maine. See the white blaze on the tree? That's how the Appalachian Trail is marked. The trail groups that maintain the trail paint white blazes on the trees. That tells you you're on the Appalachian Trail. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of the Appalachian Trail taken from the Appalachian Trail. Again, see the white blaze on the tree there? This is called a grassy bald. It's a unforested area. There are 33 of these in the Appalachian Mountains from Virginia south. There are no grassy balds north of Virginia, but there are 33, and they're ecological mysteries. If you're curious, the University of South Carolina has some interesting studies they've published. Why are there no trees there? They weren't cut down by indigenous peoples. They're not cut down today. Trees do not grow there. Some shrub bushes do like that, but they're grassy, and they're all over 3,000 feet in elevation and lie along the ridge of the Appalachian Mountains. Why? I don't know. No one knows. But they're called Appalachian balds, and they're spectacular. Again, Appalachian Trail. See the white blaze in the far straight ahead there in the background. That's marking the Appalachian Trail. Here's another picture of the grassy bald. By the way, my son and I, when he was 14, we walked across an Appalachian bald when the wild strawberries were perfectly ripe. We took hours to pick our way and eat our way across that bald. This is me at the midpoint. By the way, I should have said at the beginning, have any of you hiked on the Appalachian Trail at any part of it? Anybody? Okay. Did you do the whole trail by any chance? Okay. Well, that's a lot. I hiked from Georgia almost, I was 8 miles south of New York when I suffered a career-ending injury, I might say. Anyway, this is me at the midpoint of the trail with some friends that I met hiking back in 2009. In the winter, it's tough. I hiked on the trail in sections. I wasn't a through hiker. I would take a week or two from leave from work, and I'd hike for a couple weeks. And I hiked in I think I hiked in every month of the year. Winter's tough because the white blaze can get lost in the snow. I was actually lost on the trail once in the winter. I was able to retrace my steps through the snow back to where I knew I was on the trail. But anyway, again, pictures of the trail. This is probably the most iconic spot on the Appalachian Trail. This is in Virginia. It's called McAfee Knob. If I had walked a couple feet further away from the camera, it's about 200 feet straight down onto rocks and trees at the bottom of this knob. And if you get the vanity license plate for the Appalachian Trail in Virginia, it's got a picture. The license plate has this image of a McAfee Knob on it. What are the basics for hiking? Well, I tried to go as light as possible. Dried or freeze-dried food, little if any fresh fruits and vegetables, nothing that needs refrigeration, of course. And that gives rise to what hikers call trail angels. A trail angel is someone who offers trail magic, and you do that by parking somewhere where the trail crosses a road. And my wife and I have done that numbers of times. We take a case of oranges and a big cooler of fresh yogurt with, ice on it and soft drinks maybe that are cold. And we just put out some chairs and, as hikers come through, we welcome them to stop and eat. And you hear some very interesting stories if you do trail magic. The last time, well, not the last time, but once we did it, this fella came through. He had a big pack. And we introduced ourselves, and my trail name was Stickman. The trail name is something you're given by other hikers, or in some cases, although you're not supposed to, you give it to yourself. His trail name was 60 because his gear weighed 60 pounds. He had just come home from the 82nd Airborne Division in Iraq, got out of the Army, and like Earl Schaefer back in 1948, he was going to walk the war out of his system. His trail name was 60 because he bought a bunch of Army surplus equipment. Military equipment is built, it's tough. It's not lightweight, it's durable, tough. So he had an Army pack and an Army sleeping bag and a bunch of stuff. His pack weighed 60 pounds. And 2 or 3 minutes later, a friend of his came in. His trail name was 62. Not as in 62 pounds, but as in 60 also. And they had served together in Iraq and come home together and got out together and were going to walk to Maine. I hope they made it. Anyway, there are shelters on the trail, 250 shelters on the 2,200-mile length of the trail. They're about every 9 miles on average. I know of 2 shelters that are less than 1 mile apart, and at least one other that's 17 miles from the previous shelter. So they're not evenly spaced, but on average about every 9 miles. A shelter is always near water with a raised platform, a roof, a fire pit, a picnic table, and a privy. It's always first come, first served in a shelter, but in bad weather, there's always room for one more. I hiked over Mount Rogers, Virginia, the highest mountain in Virginia, in the fall, October. Boy, was it beautiful. But it turned really cold. This beautiful, warm, sunny October day turned dark. The skies opened up. It was hailing, windy, temperature dropped. I was soaking wet and really cold. I got to the shelter. It was full with a church group. And the church group leader said, Sarah, scoot over a little bit and let this nice man sleep between you and the wall. So I went to the back and I lay against the wall of the shelter and got in my sleeping bag almost right away because it was cold. And this woman, this young 16-year-old probably girl I was lying next to was whimpering and crying. I said, are you okay? She said, I don't have anything dry to put on. I'm so wet. And well, as an experienced hiker, I always had dry stuff. I might have been wet with what I was wearing, but I had a dry sack in my pack. So I offered her a dry pair of underwear and socks. And she gratefully took them, and I turned my back, and she somehow took off her wet clothes and put on my dry stuff. And the next morning she said, now, if you give me your name and address, I'll mail them back. I'll launder them and mail them back. No, that's okay, I said. I didn't want to explain to my wife why a young woman, you know, why are you getting your underpants mailed back by some? Anyway, there's always room for one more in bad weather. Now, the shelters, I mentioned the shelters. This is a typical shelter. That's me and my friend Pete. Again, a fellow I met on the trail. Here's a newer shelter, or a different one at least. And of course, there's always this way of sheltering, or a tent. I didn't bring a picture of my tent. This is Pete's. His trail name, by the way, anybody want to guess what his trail name was? Hangman. Because he hung a hammock and was at home anywhere. This is my wife Penny in the back left, me in the middle back, our friend Donna in the back right, and a friend named Ron on the front right. And this is Thomas Mason. He is the son of Margaret and David Mason, brother of Charles Mason, brother-in-law of Hannah Mendick Mason. And I was about to embark on a hike when he came home for 3 years in the Peace Corps. He landed in Washington, D.C., and we, met and hung out for a little while. And I told him I was about to go, and he eagerly said, "Oh, well, I'd love to go." So he went with me on a 168-mile section of the Appalachian Trail. And I tell you what, by the time that was over, everybody from Georgia to Maine knew Thomas Mason. He made more friends more easily, more quickly than anyone I'd ever have ever known. A great fellow. What about other necessities? I mentioned shelter. This is an outhouse. I call it the loo with a view. You can see the pit toilet there. Some of them are much nicer than that. Here's a newer one. This is actually a composting toilet. There's a barrel of leaf duff. You're asked after you've used it to put a couple of handfuls of leaf down into the pit, and then to replenish the barrel of leaf duff by scraping out of the woods. And believe it or not, it doesn't smell. There are no bugs. It's quite nice compared to, let's say, the loo with a view. So pictures show what the AT feels like, but of course they can't tell you what it feels like. So what does it feel like? Well, it's hard. It typically takes 5 to 7 months of hiking full time if you're going to do a through hike. And by the way, people who have done all 3 of the long distance trails in the United States, the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail, they say that by far the hardest is the Appalachian Trail, because the other 2 were laid out for stock. Cattlemen could drive a herd up to summer pasture and over into the valley beyond and back again. And of course, you can take a bicycle or ride a horse or something like that. The Appalachian Trail is for feet only, as I said, and I'll show you some pictures later about that bring that home. So 5 to 7 months of hiking full time, about 4.5 to 5 million steps cumulatively. If you add up all the up and down, of course, it nets to about 4,000 feet, because Mount Katahdin, Maine is 4,000 feet higher roughly than Springer Mountain, Georgia. But all the ups and downs add to 465,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. That's equivalent from hiking sea level to the summit of Mount Everest and back down again over 8 times. It's a lot of the boy. So I said, what's it like to hike it? It's hard. You have sore feet, tired legs. There'll be nights that are cold and hungry, and you'll want to go home. It takes real determination to do it. So more than just physical strength and endurance, it requires determination. What else does it feel like? It's peaceful and calm and quiet. And I'll tell you something. This is actually the next slide, but I'll do this now, the demonstration. This is meditative. If you do this all day through forest and beautiful country, step after careful step, it's calm and peaceful and meditative. Very, very interesting feeling. I said that, meditative. And numinous, if you know that word. Lying out on one of those grassy balds at night, on a clear night, and looking up at the stars and hearing the sounds of birds. The forest is not silent at night. I'll tell you, there are animals scurrying around, making noise in the leaves in the brush and calling to each other softly. It's a spiritual feeling to me. And you have brief but meaningful friendships, like the folks I have photographed here. Met them on the Appalachian Trail, walked together for a few days, exchanged contact information, stay in touch, walk again. Some of those folks I've hiked with 3 or 4 years. And a tremendous feeling of accomplishment at the end of a day, at the end of a hike. I can only imagine if you hiked the whole thing, how you'd feel. Henry David Thoreau said, we need the tonic of wilderness. And there are studies now you can look up. HASPA to do have a doctor give a presentation kit, or Hannah, on this. Time spent in nature improves your attention span, your feelings of happiness, your feelings of self-worth, and it reduces, time in nature reduces blood pressure, anxiety, stress, depression, and cortisol levels in measurable ways. This is good science now. So there are real positive mental and physical health benefits. But as Kit said in the introduction, there must be some risks. What's the bad news? Enteric disease, meaning diarrhea, intestinal disease, not if you're careful. You've got to wash your hands and be careful about sanitation, of course. Treat your water, because there are Giardia and other naturally occurring bacteria in some of the water sources. But enteric disease is a negligible risk if you're careful. Animals, this is on the Appalachian Trail up to the summit, up and over Mount Rogers, Virginia. This is a state park, and there are wild ponies on this state park. Well, they're not dangerous to you. Deer, no. You hear them at night calling to each other softly, walking through the woods, but they're not dangerous. That's a black bear. And eastern black bear are not aggressive to humans. They're not dangerous animals. You don't want to get between a mama and her cubs accidentally, but you can avoid that if you're a little careful. And there are bear boxes placed by the trail clubs. This is a steel container with a latch that humans can open and close, but bears can't. You put your food in there. Oh, this is at a shelter. You'd put your food a little distance removed from the shelter, but easily accessible. Put your food in there overnight, and the bears can't get it. Or you hang your food from a branch on a tree well above the ground. A bear can't get it. Don't sleep with food in your pocket or your tent or your sleeping bag. But again, that's a matter of common sense. Are there snakes? Yes, there are some. This is a big black snake. This is it's called a northern water snake. Neither one of these is aggressive or venomous, so not much to worry about. I kind of liked having snakes because they kept the mice and the rats away from the shelters. If there were snakes, there were no mice or rats. But there is one animal that I'm cautious about, and that's the eastern black-legged tick, aka the deer tick. As I'm sure you know, it carries Lyme disease. It can carry Lyme disease and some other things that you don't want to get. Getting lost, is that a risk? Well, you need to be careful. You have to know how to use a map and compass. You follow the blazes. I told you about the white blazes. See across the creek here? It looks like the trail might go straight up, doesn't it? Or possibly that way. Notice the blaze. There's two blazes, one on top of the other. The one on the top is on the left. That means that at that spot, the trail turns left. The same thing on this slide. I'm sorry, my hand is so shaking. Nervous, I guess. The upper blaze on the left, that means the trail turns left at that spot. What about humans? Well, in hunting season, I would always advise wearing bright colors. And I've twice, and all the, 100 nights I spent on the Appalachian Trail, I moved on when I wanted to stay at a shelter. I didn't because somebody was there. In one case, it was a kid talking to him, not to himself, but to his grandfather. He explained to me through the fillings of his teeth. His grandfather was sending him signals about what to do. And I thought, I'm going to just leave him and his grandfather alone. So I hiked another mile or so and slept in the woods. And once I was at a shelter where there were a couple of friends chain smoking in the shelter. I didn't want that either. So again, I walked another, mile or whatever off into the forest and down up the trail, but off to the side in the woods. So what are the risks? You knew there'd be one, huh? The number one risk to Appalachian Trail hikers is falling and breaking your leg or your ankle. That's what happened to me. Oh, it didn't break the ankle, but I severed 4 tendons in my left ankle, required surgery, and I still can't put my left foot flat on the ground. Anyway, what about the hikers? The Appalachian Trail Conservancy says that about 3 million people will touch the Appalachian Trail this year. Most just do short day or section hikes like I was doing. But about 3,000 say that they plan to do a through hike all the way to Maine. And of that number, about 1/4 make it. Studies show that most people attempting a through hike or saying they want to do a through hike they feel like they're at a crossroads in life. They're right out of college, or they're newly divorced, or they're between jobs. For some reason, they have a natural breaking point in their life and they want to do something different before they go on with the next thing. So they hike the Appalachian Trail. I almost did this when I came home from Vietnam. I was not in a real positive frame of mind, but I did something else instead. Most through hikers are in their 20s, but some in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s have made through hikes. There are hundreds of interesting stories, like Sonny Eberhardt, trail name Nimblewill Nomad. He is the oldest man known to have ever done a through hike. He turned 84 on the Appalachian Trail. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there's Neva Warren. Her trail name was Chipmunk. She turned 14 on the Appalachian Trail. A 13-year-old girl started hiking from Georgia to Maine and made it. She was 14 when she arrived. Now, her parents followed along, and they met at road crossings and that kind of thing, helped her resupply food and so forth. But still, she did the hike. There's a fellow named Tuba Man. He carried his camping equipment and a tuba from Georgia to Maine, and he gave a tuba concert every night at the shelter. Are you kidding me? Now, it's not written how the other campers felt about that. You kind of have to wonder about that. A man named Homer Witcher, he lives in Virginia, and he's very active in the Potomac Appalachian Trail Club. He's a trail maintainer. He leads a trail crew that goes out and cuts the timbers that have fallen across and whacks back the briars that have grown across and that sort of thing. And he also is a driver for people who want a ride. I would contact him and say, Homer, can you pick me up at Big Creek Ranger Station and take me to mile 506 on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm going to walk back to my car at the ranger station. Sure, easily done. And so he does that kind of thing for AT hikers. And he has a license on his car. It says GA-ME02. I said, oh, Homer, you did a through hike from Georgia to Maine in 2002. He said, sure did. My wife and I took the kids out of school. He said, we had 2 in elementary school. We took them out. We hiked the whole trail that year. We homeschooled the kids. They sure learned a lot. We said, you saw my license plate and know what it means. These parts out here in the country, people think it means gay. Me too. Then there are the barefoot sisters. These girls, what? Sorry. These girls grew up on a farm in Maine. Let's hike down to Georgia, one of them said. Sure. So they hiked from Georgia to Maine barefoot. What'd they do when they got to Georgia? Oh, I don't know. Let's hike home again. So they turned around. That's through hikers call that a yo-yo. You go down and come back up. They walked from Georgia to Maine and back to Georgia barefoot. Every step barefoot. Then there's Tara Dower. She did the entire trail in 40 days. Remember, 5 to 7 months for the typical hiker. She did it in 40 days, 18 hours and 5 minutes, setting a new record. She did that last year. God bless her. That is an incredible athletic feat. She missed all the fun. She didn't get the numinous moments out on the grassy bald, looking at the stars, looking at the magnificent views and everything, because she was, and she had a crew helping her. They had her tent set up and dinner waiting when she got there and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's a different kind of performance, but an incredible athletic feat. But one of my favorite stories concerns a man named Bill Irwin. When he was 28 years old, one eye had to be surgically removed due to cancer. At age 36, his second eye was surgically removed. So he wasn't just hard of seeing. He didn't see anything, not shadow, not bright light, nothing. And he later learned that the diagnosis was a mistake. His eyes needn't have been removed anyway. Needless to say, he was depressed, alcoholic, profoundly dysfunctional. And his son started using drugs and alcohol when he was a teenager. Bill was in his 40s. He said to his son, "You can't do this. You got to quit." "You can't make me quit, old man," said the son. "Yes, I can. I'm taking you to counseling." So Bill took his son to counseling for alcohol and drug use. And the counselor, after a couple of sessions, said, "You know, Bill, I kind of think you'd benefit from this too. Have you tried AA, Alcoholics Anonymous?" "What's that?" said Bill. The counselor told him about it. And if you know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous, they ask you to believe in a higher power, that there's a higher power that you can appeal to for help. So he went to AA, and I can't get this to advance for some reason, Kit. I'm sorry. Is Hannah here? Well, I can tell you the story, although I'd love to show you. Let me back up, go this way, and then, oops. If you don't mind, I'm so sorry. I'm stuck on that. I can't make anything happen. Oh, okay. So Bill went to AA. He thought he would, sort of look into the higher power. So he went to church for the first time, maybe ever. The results or the stories are slightly inconsistent. Either the first time in decades or the first time ever. Went to church. And the sermon that day was from 2 Corinthians. "For we walk by faith, not by sight." And Bill Irwin, in his book, Blind Courage, had a religious experience in that moment. He believed in that moment. He was overcome by a sense of faith and belief. He said, "I can do anything if I have faith. If I believe I can do it, I can do it." And I've always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. So, Hannah, sorry, I believe I can advance this slide, but it's not working. Sorry, we're still. So, anyway, so he believed he could hike the Appalachian Trail, and he did. And I don't know I'm so apologize. Oh, okay. So this is a picture of Bill Irwin with his big pack, his hiking staff, and his guide dog. He had named his dog Orient, and the trail name, they got a trail name as a couple, a man and a dog. Their trail name was the Orient Express. The dog could smell where the humans had all gone up the trail, and Bill followed along. And Bill did this entirely on his own without assistance until he got to New Hampshire and Maine. That's the top 10% of the Appalachian Trail, which hikers say is 10% of the miles and 90% of the work, because it is rocky. Can you imagine doing this if you were blind? This is actually Pennsylvania, where hiking boots go to die, hikers say. But it's the same. You imagine doing this if you're blind? Good Lord. Bill's book is called Let No One Kill Your Impossible. I'm sorry, his book is called Blind Courage. And he wrote in it, Let No One Kill Your Impossible Dreams. So final thoughts. Anyone can experience the Appalachian Trail if they want to. As a hiker, a volunteer cleaning and maintaining the trail, a trail angel offering food and stories and to hikers. So find your way. And remember, not all who wander are lost. Some are on their way to Mount Katahdin in Maine. And postscript, my cousin Jimmy. Where's Jimmy? Where's Jim? There's Jim. This is in 1963. That's my cousin Jim. He's over there in the corner. That's me, of course. My father and Jim's mother let us, believe it or not, at age 15, they drove us down into Shenandoah National Park and let us hike out on the Appalachian Trail. My first experience touching the Appalachian Trail, 1963. And just some resources. The AppalachianTrail.org is the website for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Blind Courage, the book by Bill Irwin. Walking with Spring is the book by Earl Schaefer. And I can send you this, kid, or you can keep a copy of it. Yeah. Okay. And there's a theater in Virginia, not a cinema, a playhouse called the Barter Theater. And they do something called the Festival of Appalachian Plays and Playwrights, or the Appalachian Festival of Plays and Playwrights. And they solicit plays about Appalachia or by aspiring playwrights in Appalachia. They send those out to about a dozen universities in the Appalachian region, not all in Virginia, to the English departments and the drama departments and other people in the university who might like to read the play. And those are judged, ranked by the universities. And the Barter Theater then takes the top 10, the highest ratings, 10 highest, and they do what they call mini performances on their stage. No stagecraft, no costuming, but the plays are read to a live audience. And you can sign up for all 10. You have to stay in Barter in Abingdon, Virginia for 4 or 5 days. There may be 2 a day read, and the audience rates them. And the one play that is rated the highest by the audience is then given a full production with stagecraft and costuming and actors. And in 2023, the winning play was called Grandma Gatewood Took a Walk. There are 3 characters in the play: a woman who plays Grandma Gatewood, a man who plays her husband, and a man who plays the park ranger who found her when she was lost on her first attempt up in Maine after she broke her glasses. And these plays, the winners, go around to community playhouses and such. If you ever have a chance to see this play, don't miss it. It is really heartwarming. At the end, Grandma Gatewood and the play does what Grandma Gatewood really did in real life in 1955 when she stood atop Mount Katahdin in Maine. She looked back down south at the 2,000, almost 200 miles that she had walked, and she broke into song, America the Beautiful. And in the play, the actress who plays Grandma Gatewood does that up on stage and invites the audience to stand up. And the audience stands up and sings, and it's so heartwarming, almost tears in my eyes when I was there. So don't miss it if you have a chance. And with that, I will take any questions that may come up. Thank you. Thank you.
It's wonderful. And we loved your entrance.
Thank you.
Especially.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's a mic on the other side of the room. There is. Good. Let's find out if there are any questions for Tom, and I'm sure there are. We'll start right over here on this side.
Nothing hard, you understand,
Yeah.
just, softball questions, easy ones.
While we're sitting here in this room, my grandson is on his first through hike right now. He is, he's hiking the Superior Hiking Trail,
Okay.
going from Duluth to Grand Marais.
Yeah, all right.
He would love to talk to you. I'm sure he would love to hear your stories. He's made a few mistakes, but he's learning. But I had to chuckle because he fits the demographic you mentioned perfectly. He's 20. He's going to be a senior at Hope next year. He flunked organic chemistry, so he's not going to be a doctor. He's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And there he is, contemplating his future life.
Is he carrying a tuba? Sorry, no, that was not my business.
Just one unrelated thing. I did read Grandma Gatewood's Walk. I could not believe it was real. I could not believe that woman did that. If you can get your hands on that book, I read it a while ago. I don't remember if I picked it up in the library. I don't know, but it's just a fascinating. I mean, you can't believe that the woman did that.
I have copies of her book, or the book about her rather, and Blind Courage, and Earl Schaefer wrote a book called Walking with Spring, which is there, third in the middle. So I have those up here if you want to take a look after the talk.
I have some recollection of hearing that people on this through walk end up with feet that may be a different shape and size than when they started, and they might have to get a different pair of shoes after they've returned.
I won't say I wore different size shoes, but you don't want to look at my toenails. They're not pretty. I lost toenails every time I hiked, 3 or 4 or 5. One hike, the 163-mile hike I did with Thomas Mason, I lost like 8 toenails. They did because I don't know if it's the way I step or I wear a 14 shoe, and most hiking boots don't come in 14. So I slide into them anyway. And anyway, I could well believe that it changes your feet, doing that through hike.
I'm wondering, are there many ranger stations along the way?
None on the trail, but the trail passes through 2 national parks, Great Smoky Mountain National Park and Shenandoah National Park. And so there are ranger stations, of course, at those parks. But most of it then goes through 7 national forests, in addition to 2 national parks, and tons of state forests and just public lands that are open for anybody to walk. I never walked past a ranger station but I can tell you, my son and I hiked through Great Smoky Mountain National Park on the first time I went hiking with him. It's 72 miles from the southern end of Great Smoky Mountain National Park to the northern end on the Appalachian Trail. And we started out, it was hot, it was August, it was out of school, hadn't started yet. Springs, it had been hot and dry, and some of the springs were dry, and the admonition from the trail conference was carried lots of water. So I got a ride from Homer Witcher down to Big Creek. I drove to Big Creek Ranger Station. He met me there, drove us down to the southern end of Smoky Mountain National Park, and we started hiking north, and we'd gone about 25 steps when my son said, "Dad, this sucks. Let's go. I want to go home." Home is 72 miles that way. So we walked up to the north end of the park where there's a ranger station called Big Creek. Now, so that took, 8 days or something like that, 10 days maybe. And if National Geographic was going to photograph the most beautiful, iconic Appalachian stream, they couldn't do worse than Big Creek, Tennessee. It is beautiful. And we shouldn't admit this probably, but stripped off, and at least down to skivvies, and got in some of the deep pools of the Appalachian, this creek, and clean, cold water. It was so refreshing. And when we got back to the car, David said, "Dad, this is great. Let's do this again next year, hike another." So, but that's the only ranger station I know of that's, you might say, right, this 4 or 5 miles off the trail down Big Creek, but close.
Tom,
Yeah.
I have a question for
Okay.
myself.
Sure.
besides the injuries to your ankle, what do you feel would have been the most dangerous or the toughest part of the trail hiking for you?
For me, it was blisters and the toenail problems I had. And that was just because I didn't have shoes that really properly fit me. And in hindsight, I hiked with too heavy leather boots. Now I would walk in canvas or, much lighter weight, and I'd make sure they fit well. But probably it was foot pain and toenail problems, blisters and that sort of thing.
Not poisonous snakes
No.
or angry
Well,
bears?
I mean, a lot of people are properly afraid of snakes. I'm cautious about snakes. By the way, the time hiking to Great Smoky Mountain National Park with my son, we saw the biggest rattlesnake I have ever seen. It was this big around and 6 feet long. And it saw or heard or felt us approaching before we saw it. It rattled. And I have to tell you, that arrested me. I froze instinctively. I didn't think, oh, snake, I better stop. No, I froze instinctively. And then I looked, I saw the snake, and okay, back up, David. Let's go. Let's turn around. And so you need to be cautious that there are people who get snake bit, a few, but I'm just cautious about snakes. As I said, I don't fear them especially, but I don't try to be friends either. I give them their space.
In case there's an emergency on the trail, is there any cell phone coverage out there at all, or how do you get help?
Today, there is cell phone coverage on probably all of the trail. There didn't used to be. Now there is. And there are also people called trail walkers. They're some of the volunteers for the Appalachian Trail Club that manages that section of trail. And their volunteer job is to walk up and down they maybe have a 40-mile section of trail, and they may be 2 of them on that section, and they pass each other. They walk up and down that section of Appalachian Trail exactly for that reason, to help you. They have a walkie-talkie radio or a shortwave set, and they will call air evacuation or whatever you might need. So I think today you'd be pretty safe medically on the AT.
I had one other question. I
Sure.
know someone who has walked the trail,
Okay.
not a through walker, but
Okay.
in degrees. And there was mention of they've had boxes shipped to various points
Yeah.
along the way
Yeah.
for them to
Yeah, sure. Yep. Resupply. I did that too.
resupply
Yeah,
and
right.
even at some point go into towns and
Yep.
sleep in a bed
Yep.
for a night. or
Well,
two.
I've done that too. And there are places there's a town in Virginia. The trail goes right down the main street, and the big church in town opens its basement for hikers. They call it a refuge or a shelter. You can stop there, and there's showers and actual beds. And there's stores in the town. You can get resupply. You can mail packages to one of the resources I have up here is called the Appalachian Thru Hikers Companion, and another one called the Appalachian Trail Thru Hikers Handbook. And they both have post office addresses of towns that are near the trail, where you get off the trail. Maybe you have to walk a mile on a Forest Service road or something, and then you can hitchhike into town a few miles away, and you can have packages mailed to you with resupply of food. Okay.
Did you have any experience with the Sunfish Pond? I hiked part of the Appalachian Trail. Actually, here's the book with
Okay.
my husband. That
Oh.
was the test of our marriage. Before we were married, he was a big camper and a hiker, and he invited me to go along this trail. I carried 40 pounds on a backpack.
Yeah.
It lasted a week. I obviously got proposed to. I passed the test. But
Oh.
anyway, the Sunfish Pond was interesting at the time. We went in, I think, 1970. There were a lot of groups that were hanging out there, so to speak. And I think it wasn't the nicest place at one time. There were a lot of encampments. with the swimming and people staying there for many days.
Yeah.
So I wondered
Can
if
you
you
remind
had
me
an
where
experience.
Sunfish Pond is? Remind me, please. Where is Sunfish? What state?
I think the Delaware Water Gap. We
Okay.
started the
Yeah.
Delaware Water
Yeah.
Gap and hiked towards New York.
Okay, all right.
Port
Yeah.
Jervis.
Yes,
Right.
I went past, I didn't stay there. But, one of the surprising things to me was how many young women are doing the trail by themselves. I mentioned people being at a crossroads, like graduated from college. And a surprising number, surprising to me, young, girls right out of college said, yeah, I'm going to hike for a month or whatever. I'm going to
Yes.
try to go all the distance. And, God bless them. I hope, but it surprised me. Young men didn't surprise me so much, but young women doing it alone, or sometimes with a friend, a couple of women would, 2 or 3 women would go together, but really a very surprising number of young, 20-something women wanting to hike the trail by themselves. So anyway, about Sunfish Pond, I remember the place, but I didn't have any experience really there.
Well, it's quite the place to hike, but we didn't have all those little conveniences along the way. It was
Yeah.
pretty rough.
Oh,
So-
yeah. I didn't mean to make it sound easy or convenient.
No.
You're going to suffer a little bit. You really have to be determined and be willing to be hungry and tired and sore and blistered and maybe sunburned or tick bitten or God forbid snake bitten or something like that. For sure, it takes a real commitment and dedication to hike the trail. And so Grandma Gatewood, God bless her, she did it at a time when, during the World War II years, the trail was called Lost and Forgotten. It wasn't much better in 1955. It was a little better, but boy, she was one tough character, as I said on the presentation. She was bitten by a rattlesnake and treated herself with, frontier medicine that she learned growing up dirt poor in Appalachia. So, yep.
Are there any sections that you could do a day hike where the footing is not so terribly rocky that would be a little more friendly to people with knee and ankle issues?
Hundreds of such places, thousands probably, truly. Drive, if you're driving ever through Great Smoky Mountain National Park, the Blue Ridge Parkway, or Skyline Drive and Shenandoah National Park, there will be scenic roadside pull-off for a beautiful vista. And there may be a sign that says Appalachian Trail. It goes right, not through the parking lot, but very close. You can maybe see the trail even. You can go for as long as you want, some mild section. And the ridges are pretty straight, and the trail is usually quite nice there. Not a problem for feet or ankle problems, etc. Sure. I mean, not on the trail, but at the vista, sure. And I bet there are places that I don't know about, and probably went through many that are that you could identify with the guidebook. Yep.
Tell us about the food that you carried with you, or what are your stories about
Yeah, thank you.
food?
Well, the first hike that I did with my son when he was 14, I left with almost 60 pounds in my pack because I carried a bunch of stuff that I later decided I didn't need. But and I should have said this in the presentation, something I call the Tao of hiking, the Tao of AT trekking. You want to be comfortable? Carry nothing. You want to be comfortable walking, hiking, carry nothing. Water for the day, and that's all. You want to be comfortable camping? Take a big, thick air mattress and a big sleeping bag and a stove and a bunch of food and maybe some liquor for after chocolate, all the things that you want, glass of wine with your trail dinner. Comfortable camping versus comfortable hiking. And I evolved over my section hikes. My last section hike for a week with 1.5 liters of water for the day and food for a week and all the camping supplies and everything I would need, my pack weighed 26 pounds. Yeah, so, you learn. If I can talk while I grab something, I'll show you something I think is pretty cool. But go ahead, I can take a question while I do this.
Quick question. In this day and age, how do you charge phones and cameras and things?
I do not know. That's a short answer to that. I don't know how you could take a battery bank for your phone, I guess. I don't know how you would charge anything there. Okay, you can buy solar power chargers that unroll, and I don't know how long it would take to charge a phone with one of those, but yeah, that's a good point. Solar charger. And next, or others? Yeah, okay.
Attention, Tom. You
Yep.
talked about how narrow the trail is and how literally did you mean that?
I don't know legally how narrow it is, but it is literally a footpath wide enough for one. And it probably goes a few feet for the federally protected part is probably 3 or 4 feet on each side of the one-person trail. So I'm guessing maybe 8 or 10 feet wide, 2,200 miles long. But there's no place that it's wide enough for 3 people to walk together. Well, I take that back. There are a few places where you might be walking down an abandoned forest road or something where maybe, and where I grew up in West Virginia, there are old railroad beds from when the virgin timber was logged off. They put a logging railroad in, and that's long, long abandoned, but the level trail is there where the railroad bed was. And there are parts of the Appalachian Trail that might follow something like that for a distance. But it's not wide enough to, do much with.
Tom,
Yes.
have you met people on the trail that you've become lifelong friends with or long-term friends with?
Sure have. Donna and Jim were pictured, and my friend named Pete, whose trail name was Hangman. I met Donna and Jim on that. Remember the first slide? I said, this is not mile 0. It's 8.5 miles up that trail to mile 0. Walking up that mountain, I encountered this man and woman walking along, and we walked together a while, and then we ended up, we were camping at the same spot up on the trail, and so fell into conversation. And I said, how much hiking have you done anyway? And at that point, we'd gone maybe 10 miles from Amicalola Falls State Park. She said, oh, 10 miles. No, I said, I mean, other than today, how much have you done? Oh, 10 miles. What? She said, well, the first time we ever had a backpack on today. I said, oh my God, well, how far are you going? Maine, she said. And they did. She and her husband did go to get to Maine. They're the ones on my last slide. It said the picture of, in front of the sign on the top of Mount Katahdin. So I'm looking for something that I haven't found, but I'm happy to take questions while I look for something in here. Well, I'll just tell you what it is. It's a little brass thing. It's about the size of the bottom half of this water bottle. It's got a screw top. You unscrew it and you pour in a flammable liquid. You can do paint thinner. Guess what? You can do bourbon or rum, anything that burns. And with, say 2 fluid ounces of a flammable liquid, it will bring a liter of cold spring water to a full boil in about 8 minutes. It's a Swiss thing, fabulous. And it weighs like 4 or 5 ounces. It's nothing. So I would carry that after I was in my Dow of hiking days and decided I'm really going light. I'm tired of losing toenails. I'm going to not carry any more than I have to. I would eat freeze-dried food mostly. At night, when I went to bed, I'd put oatmeal into boiling water and let it sit overnight. I'd put dried fruit in there with it. And in the morning, it would be a wonderful overnight oatmeal with prunes or raisins or craisins or what have you. I'd add some walnuts and stuff like that in the morning, some protein powder. And it was a really quite delicious, quite nutritious breakfast. And for lunch, I'd eat an energy bar, a couple granola bars or something like that. And for dinner, I'd have freeze-dried spaghetti or something of that sort. I bought my own freeze dryer and my own, not freeze dryer, my own dehydrator. I experimented with making my own dehydrated, spaghetti and chili and that sort of thing, and decided I'd rather spend $8 or whatever it is for a commercially prepared one. But I tried to go as light as possible, and my lightest pack for a week of hiking and water for the day weighed 26 pounds. So you can get light if you want to, and there's all kinds of books and advice, as you can imagine, on ultralight hiking.
Are you still going out, Tom?
Well, I love to walk and I love to do day hikes, but the surgery I had for the ankle injury I sustained, as I said, just south of the New York state line, pretty much ended I think my ability to safely walk on the kinds of trails that I was showing you with all those rocks. I have to wear an ankle brace. Of course, I use poles, but even with that, I think I'm probably at too much risk. And although there's medical assistance available now, I don't want to find out have a first person experience with that. So I walk, in other ways, in other places, but I don't think I'll get back on the AT. At least not the part that's up there at the the part I haven't done. It's where it's the hardest. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so does it make a difference for through hikers whether you start in Georgia and go north or start in Maine and go south?
I don't know.
Is there like a tactical difference?
No, I don't think it makes any difference in terms of the difficulty of the trail. The traditional way is to start in Georgia and hike north. Earl Schaefer, remember the first man to do the trail, he called his book Walking with Spring. So traditionally you start maybe in February or March and you walk north as it gets to be springtime. And the northern terminus of the trail closes to the public at the end of September. Baxter State Park in Maine is where Mount Katahdin is. And they close because of fire season and bad weather, and they're tired of trying to rescue people who get caught in snowstorms and so forth. So anyway, yes.
And that runs right through Michigan.
Okay. I don't know much about that trail, but
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it starts in New York and ends.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Dakotas. Anyway, it runs right through Michigan from the southeast corner up through the Upper Peninsula.
Okay.
So my husband and I, we hiked, day sections of it.
Okay, yeah, good. I'd like to experience that trail and learn more about it. Anybody want to hazard a guess or know what the longest hiking path in the world is, where it is, what it's called? It's called the Trans-Canada Trail. And it runs from the northern part of northeastern Canada, Nova Scotia, down along and around all the Great Lakes, over to the Pacific and up to, almost to the Arctic Circle in British Columbia. It's 10,000 miles long. So, right.
Anyone else have any other questions to ask Tom?
I'll dig out those books if anybody's interested in just taking a look and see. But there's the list of them right there. Walking with Spring, Grandma Gateway's Walk, and Blind Courage. And the Bill Bryson book, A Walk in the Woods. I love that book. Read it a couple of times. I still laugh out loud when I read it. And you know what? The Appalachian Trail community hates that book. The real through hardcore hikers say, well, he didn't hike the whole trail. He only, wrote about it. He only did a few little pieces of it and then wrote about like he had done it or he didn't do it. And they're so self-righteous about it. I say, come on, man, it's a funny story. It, relax and enjoy it. I love the book, but anyway.
Last minute, anybody? You all ready to walk with us?
Yes. Thank you so much, Chet. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was fun. Oh, thank you. Thank you.